Welcome to the Catalyst Sell Podcast. Many of us struggle with sales. This could be due to a lack in confidence, reduced comfort, and just not wanting to be salesy. We want to help our customers, and we know we can, but we complicate the process. This podcast is designed to help folks like you improve at sales through process, practice, frameworks, and thinking. This is Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale. I'm really excited to have Chris Ronzio on the podcast today. Chris is the founder and CEO of Trainual. We'll discuss entrepreneurship, process design, delegation, and a number of other topics. Hey, Chris, thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike.
So the thing that inspired me to reach out to you, we've come, our paths have crossed a couple of times in the last 4, 5, 6 months. But the thing that inspired me to ask you if you would be on the podcast before, I was looking for a reason. And then I saw a video that you posted where you were talking about the 5 types of entrepreneur. And part of the story, the catalyst for the story was that you went out to get a loan, or you're doing something in a bank. You're opening an account in a bank, and they were asked the point on employment, and they were like, "Oh, so you're self-employed," and that led to creating a YouTube video. So, can you talk a bit about that experience, and then let's get into those 5 types?
Yeah, so I was actually opening a bank account for my son, my 5-year-old son, who's gotten checks like since he's been born, but I've like kept them in a pile, or they're made out to me or something, and I figured it's time this kid has a bank account. So I go to the bank, and it was crazy you couldn't do this online, first of all, but I had to go to the bank and open up an account for him. And as part of the application, they're like, okay, where do you work, address, how long have you been there? And the more they get down the line of questions, then they start looking at me like, oh, is it your business? Are you self-employed? I was like, well, I don't know. Something felt off about that term, right? Yes, kind of, but the business pays me a paycheck. Like, I'm a W-2 employee of the business. We've got an office. We've got a bunch of other employees. And so something about being self-employed just felt like I was an Uber driver or something, And so like, I'm thinking about this. I was telling my wife, I don't know why it was bothering me so much. I've definitely overreacted. But I started to write out this idea that there's different stages of entrepreneurship. And so to highlight this really quickly, do you want me to even go into them? Yeah, just to do high level, because we'll link to the YouTube video. So everybody can watch the YouTube video and they can see the energy that you bring to it. But just high level. Yes. So high level, it's like you start as a student. You're a newbie. You're trying to learn, soak in as much as you can, get mentors. And then you go into this like night shift mode where maybe you've got a side hustle and you're experimenting and you're making some money. And then you go into this middle section, which is self-employment. And that's when you've cobbled together your own income. You figured it out. You can quit your job, like you're self-sustaining. And then the stage after that is when you're an actual business owner. That means you've got other employees. You're paying salaries. You're paying yourself a consistent salary. And then the 5th stage is that you're a CEO, which means you're not necessarily doing the work in the business. You're not the technician anymore, but you're kind of mentoring and guiding the vision. So those are the 5 stages as I saw it. And I hope the people at the bank read it. I think they're awesome. And as you go through it, why do you think there's like this negative connotation? I know you said Uber driver, and there are some people who are out there, they're Uber drivers because they're negative on some other thing. But there's initially you kind of go, oh, here, what is this? And whether it's negative connotation, I'm less than, you hear the whole other thing where you talk about investment and people are like, well, that sounds like a lifestyle business. I don't know what other business is anything more than, the reason why we do the work is to support a lifestyle and a family that we want, I think at some core root level. So maybe all of our jobs are lifestyle businesses or something, but why is there this negative thing where someone's like, oh, so you're self-employed or it's lifestyle or whatever? Like, why do we have this junk out there? Well, I think from the bank's perspective, there's this stigma of the insecurity and the risk around being an entrepreneur. So they can't underwrite that. They can't get excited if you don't have consistent paychecks and all this. And I think they got in a lot of trouble doing that in the past. So particularly there, but you asked a broader question, the stigma around a lifestyle business or around driving Uber or doing whatever it is. I agree. I think, people should do whatever, their context around how much they want to scale their business is theirs, it's their life. And I tell people, so often, you get this advice like you should, instead of working in the business, work on the business and do this stuff. A lot of people just want to work in their business. Like they like their business. They want to do that. And that's totally fine. So it's just, you've got to be honest with yourself on the lifestyle you're after and what you're trying to produce.
Yeah. Well, and be comfortable testing some of those things. I mean, like you were talking about it in the video, and we'll include links to the video because I think a really cool video, and the stuff that you're doing on YouTube is really, really impressive. Like it just is.
Oh, thank you.
And I feel like it's weird because you've been doing it now for a while, or what it seems like a while to me when I look back at all of the videos. But this is something that you've decided to invest heavily on, and I'd like to get into that a little bit later here. But as we go through this kind of idea of that first phase where you like, hey, I want to test some things, but I've got the stability of having something behind me. So it's okay to test with a W-2. Fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
it's like if you've got that security and that's what gives you the flexibility to after hours start to cobble something together, totally fine. I think it just depends on, some businesses might take more time, or you've got a bigger market opportunity that's time sensitive, or you've got someone else that wants to work on it with you and they feel there's an imbalance with you working your W-2 and them not. So I think it's situational, but if you're just spinning something up on the side, absolutely continue taking a paycheck, make it an easier transition.
So you get into this other piece, the potential conflict. And as people start to look at it and say, well, I am taking on maybe more risk, and everybody has a different perception of what their risk tolerance is or their specific risk profile. How can we improve communication, whether it's as founders or business leaders or even just employees inside an organization? What are some of the things we can do to improve communication?
So just communication in general with our peers, with managers, how so?
Yeah, exactly. Great. Yeah, awesome question. So communication, let's start with peers. So how can we improve communication with peers?
So there's a couple things we do. We rely heavily on Slack. We use it for all the chats in the organization. We've got channels for everything like ordering snacks for the kitchen or ordering lunch or different departments or all of our 5 core, annual priorities. We've got different channels. And so those are the meeting places where people communicate on certain topics. And we have fun there, the emojis and the GIFs and all this. It's a fun place. And so that just keeps conversation light and casual and consistent. We do this thing called, I think it's a plugin for Slack called Donut, where it will pair people up on a weekly or monthly basis. And so you get to meet people in different departments and areas of the company, go grab a coffee. And so that's a way we're encouraging that ongoing communication. We do monthly outings with the team, whether it's a happy hour, spring training game, racing go-karts, those sort of things. We do quarterly bigger planning retreats. And then we also do like an annual planning session, which this year we're going to Park City, Utah for 3 years, the whole company on a plane. And that sort of interaction sets the foundation for great communication after those interactions. And so I think it's important to invest in experiences for your team because then it gives them the trust in each other that they can communicate more transparently. Whereas if you don't have that bond with people, it's hard to say what you want to say.
Well, and it sounds like there too, you're building this really cool culture that will evolve as more and more people come in the organization and they interact, because there are some people who are going to be more comfortable, interacting on Slack and may say certain things on Slack that they may not say in, when they're, and I'm going to sound like a giant stalker here, but part of it's just the prep, but you got a cold brew tap inside the office. That's supposed to bump up productivity. But as you go through you're going to have different types of communication that really work well for some folks in various areas. How do you monitor that or look at it to determine, am I leaving some people behind because they don't like to communicate one way or the other, or because maybe they don't like to ride go-karts or they don't like to do whatever? Like, how do you navigate that?
Well, we encourage everyone to submit ideas for the types of outings that we do. So that's it's a collaborative process. We do an all hands meeting every Monday where the entire company stands around our biggest room and we review some metrics together. It's a 15-minute meeting, so it's really quick, but we touch on just fun stuff that's going on through the week. And then we put a lot of emphasis on these frequent one-on-one check-ins. And so you've got your department kind of check-ins every week. Every department's got one of these. But then every quarter, you have a system, a software tool we use that prompts you to give a lot of feedback about the company, about your manager, about the role. And we do that to try to give people space to vent. Because when I was consulting before this business, I would interview hundreds of employees. It was actually over 2,000 employees I interviewed in a 5-year period. And the biggest concern I saw was that they just didn't have space to vent. They didn't have anyone to talk to. And so when I'd come in, they'd unload with all of these complaints and issues. And it's amazing. It's like if you had told someone that a year ago, what kind of difference could that have made for the business? And so we're really proactive about getting people to contribute those ideas.
It's awesome. And if you believe that that's not happening inside your organization, where there's people who maybe are withholding information because they think there's some kind of negative implication, or there's going to be something that'll happen as a result of them sharing or saying directly or whatever, if you believe that everybody's as transparent as you'd like them to be, I would suggest that you check yourself, look in the mirror, ask some of those direct questions, or come up with some of these ways to communicate. Because just like Chris had said, you find out people start to feel more comfortable talking with those outside of the organization related to problems that are happening inside of the organization. And each time that I would imagine, Chris, when you'd have that conversation with the leader about feedback that you're getting in the general overarching theme, they're either surprised by it and want to take some kind of action, or maybe they avoid it and say that it doesn't exist. And either way, you kind of know what you're dealing with.
More often they're wanting to take action, because if they hired me and paid me the money to come in and do this, that they had some inspiration behind it. But yeah, it's amazing how without that interjection, without that extra push of somebody coming in and driving that action, these things can just get swept under the rug and you don't deal with them. And so I think it's crucial. You've got to have an open line of communication where people can talk to their manager. They can skip over their manager and talk to you. They can submit anonymously their feedback through some kind of software tool that you've got out there. Like any way that people are comfortable, they've got to be able to communicate. Otherwise, you'll see them get disengaged. And that's when you deal with turnover. And we've been fortunate to have a real strong culture.
Yeah. So what are some of the things so I know you talked about these kind of individual communication and the different events that can drive some engagement. What are some other things? Let's say someone's dealing with remote teams and, with everything that's going on, you get more and more of this discussion around remote, or are we going to see remote continue to increase? If you've got remote teams, how can you create a similar environment, understanding that people are just so distributed?
So remote will happen more and more. Yes. I think that as companies are more and more remote and more distributed, they are able to find more specialists for the roles that they need done, where you're not just shopping in your own backyard. You've got a way more, larger talent pool, and you can pull from experiences that are far broader. So I think remote will just continue to increase. And the way to counterbalance that is like I said, those physical events, doing events. I'm a owner of another company, part owner of another company that has graphic designers, full-time graphic designers dispersed around the world, over 400 full-time employees. And there was we do annual events in all of the countries that these employees are. And, last time we flew out to the Philippines and had 300 people in a ballroom in a hotel in the Philippines. And you can't imagine the kind of motivation that creates and the kind of connections that create, that meeting someone for the first time that you've been on Zoom calls with for 6 months, it builds a bond that then you can build from, you can carry on with the digital mediums. But I think there's got to be a physical element too.
Absolutely. So let's go back into kind of these, the types of entrepreneur that's out there. And as much as I said, hey, we said, we'll go back to the video, and the video goes into detail, but now I'm coming back to a couple of other questions around it. But let's say we move that point to where we say, all right, this has been good as it is, and I'm excited about the business that I'm driving, but I really need to build some scale or build some capacity or build some capability in the organization. I want it to be bigger than something I can just do on my own. Mm-hmm. How did you go through that transition? And what are some questions we should think about if we are going through that kind of transition?
So when you go from this place that you want a business to be bigger than just you, or bigger than you and a few of your friends, there's this trademark, this phrase that I trademarked because I was saying it so much, and it's do it, document it, delegate it. And so the idea is that in a business, role by role, hat by hat, you're learning how to do things. You're creating experiments, you're testing it, you're seeing what works, and you're doing that over and over until you find something consistent, a recipe that works. And then you do that thing the same way every time. And when you feel like you're showing up and doing it the same way today that you did yesterday, you know you've got something repeatable. And so at that point, you need to document it. You need to say, what is the recipe? Like, let me, now that I've fine-tuned the ingredients, what's the recipe? Let me write it down. And you go through and step by step write down how you do it. And then finally, you can delegate it, which is communicating it to someone else and handing off the responsibility. And so it's simple, but companies need to follow that process, that procedure for every single responsibility in the business, every role in the business. And if you do that little by little, you're creating this scalable infrastructure. And you're creating something that can grow, and you're creating a playbook for your business. And that's kind of at the root of Trainual, which we could talk about later. But that's how you replicate yourself. That's how you clone yourself, is to realize that you've settled in on a consistent process, and then take a step back and write it down, and then hand it to someone else so they've got a clear recipe. A lot of people make the mistake of delegating something before it's documented. And then how are you supposed to hold someone accountable? You've given them no expectation, right? You haven't shown them how to do it. Or you document something before you're doing it consistently. And now you've just wasted all this time because you changed how you did it next week. And you're wondering why you wrote it down in the first place. So if you could follow this, it's just a 3-step thing. I think that's how you scale little by little.
It's awesome. And to hear it in that context, do it, document it, and delegate it. Why do we struggle in business in doing these things? Like, what gets in the way of us doing that stuff? Why do we not see value in it?
Lack of focus, and delegation is hard, especially delegating things you're good at. And so, it depends on the person here, whoever's listening. I would guess that you'd have no problem delegating the stuff you hate. Like, when you hire someone, you get to the place economically that you can, you're like, yes, please, you do that. I don't want to do that. See you later. I'm never touching that again. But then the things that you're good at some point in the business, you've got to stop doing things you're good at and stretch yourself to taking on other responsibility, And so I wireframed the whole I did the design of the whole Trainual thing, but I haven't designed a thing in 2 years now because that was just something I had to give up. And I thought I was really good at it. Like, everything was pixel perfect. The first designer I brought in, they'd have margins be like off by a little, and I'd point at it on the screen and be like, no, I'm taking it back. You're out of here. But so everyone goes through this. But I think if you can get good at handing off things you're good at, that's a secret weapon.
Well, I figured since we have access to Canva and Adobe Illustrator, I'm all of a sudden a designer now. Is that not right?
Yeah. No, embrace it if that's what you want to do.
It is not what I want to do. It is not what I want to do, and it's what I want to delegate. Like, it's funny to hear you say it in that context that, hey, we're really good at holding on to the things we enjoy doing, and also really good at passing on the things we don't enjoy doing. And maybe we've got to start asking ourselves more questions about what gaps is it creating if we're delegating things that we're not good at before we really understand where it fits in the system, or if we are holding on to things that we think we do really well and not allowing something else to come in. What do you think about the idea of letting go of some of those things and how that could drive innovation in the organization and create more creative space for things to expand beyond I was pixel perfect? Like, did you see that in your business?
Yeah. Well, I want to hone in on something you said because it's genius. So it's you talk about Canva and Illustrator and all these things. Like, it is easier than ever to start a business because of all the tools that exist and all the training that exists. And you can go to LinkedIn Learning and you can buy a Udemy course and you can be an expert in something in like 3 hours sitting in your bed with your laptop. And it's easier than ever to start and learn a new skill. But I think that the contrast is that it's harder than ever to scale because now you've got to hand off more skills. Like, if you, as the person starting this in any position or growing this, if you're taking on more and more responsibility, it's harder. You become cemented into your responsibilities. Think of this from the perspective of an employee too. Like you hire a great employee that's versatile. They're a Swiss Army knife. They take on every project, but now you don't want to promote that person to a different thing because you're relying on them for those dozen things, right? So they get stuck in a position and that doesn't feel good. So I think it is easier than ever to start and it's harder than ever to scale. But back to your question, the benefit of scaling and passing off responsibilities is that you get the network effect of all these other people working on that problem. And as soon as you hand something off, there's a little learning curve, getting someone up to speed, doing it like you did. But then you've got to expect that 6 months from now, that person's the expert. And they're going to have best practices that have up-leveled this thing beyond where you could have because you didn't have the bandwidth or the attention to focus on. And so the beautiful thing is as you start to delegate wide across the organization, you see all these different roles growing and improving and they start to work together. And it's amazing, but that doesn't happen if you can't let go.
It's almost like you need the reminder of that Frozen song. Right. Maybe every once in a while we just got to play that in the background.
Yeah, totally. I have a slide. Yeah, that's good. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. That's my excuse. I'm not just listening to this in the car sometimes, but I have a slide in my presentation that's Elsa on the mountain saying like, you got to just let it go. And it's all about this.
It's awesome. Well, I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. Both of them are boys. And I still have that song on a playlist related to getting my mind right on other things. So, I'm sometimes it's the simple things, yet we want to overcomplicate it. And it's kind of crazy how we do it. So one of the lessons that I learned here relatively recent, and I want to get into your focus on brand and align it with this, but I looked at the business and said, there are some things I do really well. And there are some things that I don't do really well. For the things that I don't do really well, and this kind of gets into the delegation, or the things that are not necessarily things that I do really well, but don't necessarily need my time and attention, started to outsource those. And my wife's getting involved and she does the show notes now. And originally I was looking at these things and I was like, the detail of the show notes has to be perfect. The reality is adoption of the podcast continues to grow. The show notes have changed and I'm not doing that work anymore. And I have more time to do other things. So sometimes you just have to get past your own freaking bias and your own stuff.
It's a great point. You don't have to expect perfectionism. You've got to, there's a saying, it's like done is better than well done or so, something like that. Yeah. And I think there's, like I mentioned, there is that learning curve. You can't have an expectation it's going to be as good as how you do it from day one, unless you use Trainual. But then once you hand it off, give them some room to grow, a little space to fail, but then you'd be surprised. I think people embrace the responsibilities.
So let's talk about the piece on focus with brand. So you are focused on brand and doing some really interesting, cool things around brand identity and delivering the brand out to the marketplace. What created that focus? Like, why are you creating that focus and how can others create, whether it's a focus on brand or anything else? Like what prompted the focus and how do you create focus?
Software is a commodity. Software is anyone can produce software. There's libraries, template libraries, there's open source code. You can spin something up. It's really easy. Someone could probably hack Trainual, not security wise, but like hack together a copycat of Trainual. That's what I'm trying to say, and have it up and running in half a year or something. And if we want to compete long term and we want to, be a leader in the market, it all comes down to brand. You've got to have a connection with your audience. They've got to believe that you're the company with the vision that matches theirs, because if they're signing up for your product and putting a bunch of materials into it, they want to know that in 3 years from now, you're going to be developing things and serving a market that they're still in. They still want to be important. And so much of that is how you message and how you brand your company. It's attracting customers that are going to be long-term customers. So we decided early on, my brother and I went and walked around a few trade shows and looked at competitors and saw what people were saying and doing. And we picked out a few things that we felt like all these enterprise software tools are just overly polished and there's no people behind the product and it's all just screenshots. And so we wanted to be much more authentic and natural and have people and our actual employee faces all over the place. So we invested in photography. We got, we don't use any stock photos or weird illustrations of cartoons. We've got like our actual employees all throughout our website and our decks and everywhere. We wanted to be more small business focused and less of a HR compliance kind of tool, more of a hybrid of HR and operations. Policies, processes go hand in hand. And so we took that operations angle on the product. And so a lot of these things were choices based on the customer we wanted to serve and how we could differentiate to what was in the market and what was authentic to us. Like, I've had my own business in some form or another for over 20 years. And so I'm building this company to scratch my own itch. And I think that's what we try to make apparent through our advertising.
So the piece on, I've got two questions, and I'm going to ask the first one on focus. And so when it comes down to creating focus, how do you do that? Do you have a process or a practice that you go through to help create focus in, and whether this is business or life or anything in general, like how do you create focus?
I do 90-day challenges. So every 90 days, I've got some goals personally and professionally that I'm out to hit. And so on the business side, there could be a revenue goal, a number of hires that we're going to bring in, a project-based goal like moving into a new office. There's those types of goals. On the personal side, like I'm training for a marathon right now. That's a very measurable thing. If you ran the race or not. I've got vacation that I did with my son. That was like a big thing that I wanted to do. And so in every quarter, I've got these measurable things that I can check the box and say, yes, I did that. And so it stems from the annual planning that I do once a year with my wife. We go away and plan out the whole year. And then I do the same thing with the leaders of the company. We plan out the whole year on a retreat. And then we both at home with my wife and at the office, we revisit those goals quarterly, monthly, and make them happen every week.
Very cool. On the piece around this, as you go through the branding exercise and you start talking about, you design out these scenarios that you're going to be able to support, how hard is it to say no to certain customers because they're just not the right fit for you?
It is hard. And I think it takes discipline and it takes the filter of knowing who your ideal customer is. So, just 2 weeks ago, I was in a meeting with our director of product and our lead engineer, and I'm pitching them on some cool idea that I got from one of our sales execs who is talking to this big customer, cool logo, want to add the logo to our website. I'm like, yeah, we can do that, right? And so I get in the room with them and our lead engineer looks at me and he goes, after 45 minutes, he's like, this kind of doesn't feel like it serves the small business customer we're going after. And I was like, you're right. Like it took that, that feedback, but it's hard because you get these shiny objects in your business. And it, as an entrepreneur, from my standpoint, it's like a problem to solve, something to be creative about, something to like something to start. So you've got to go back to what are we accomplishing this month and this quarter, and let's just stay the course.
That's awesome because scope creep can just be a killer. It's amazing the negative impact that can have, whether it's scope creep and the acquiring customers that are outside of your ideal customer profile, or starting to look at incorporating components because, hey, yeah, this is really cool that you're able to build in templates, but we can plug in a chat bot in there that's going to help people communicate better inside the system. And really, how does that align with the brand or the thing that you're building? So let's talk about the thing that you've built in Trainual. And I let you know just before we started recording that actually I signed up earlier in the week, and I was surprised and delighted about both the idea that when I logged in, each of the templates that are there showed the template as a Catalyst sale template, even though I didn't download the template yet and I'd not built it out, but just the level of detail to say, and I know I'm not a programmer. I would imagine it's just a variable where the variable pulls from some other thing inside the system, but it looked so natural. And so help me kind of understand the journey that you went from consulting practice to starting to build out Trainual to where you are now and what Trainual does for organizations that work with you.
Sure. So the idea for Trainual came in 2014. I was in the midst of my consulting business. So I had a few dozen companies I'd worked with, and they were typically 5 to 50 employees. That was like my sweet spot. And so I'd go in, like I said, interview all the employees, figure out where the bottlenecks were in the company, inefficiencies, and then recommend tech and software and, different things to make them more efficient. And so that was the business. And as I was doing that, the feedback that kept popping up in all different buzzwords was like, roles and responsibilities are unclear, or I don't know what expectations are on me, or my job has changed 4 times since I've been here, or like me and Susie do this a different way and I can't get Susie to do it my way, or like people keep leaving and I've got a turnover problem, or I'm trying to open a second location and it's failing miserably. And so all those things pointed back to companies just need a playbook. They need, however you want to say it. It could be an operations manual. It can be a franchise manual. It can be a standard operating procedures. It can be a handbook. Like whatever the terms you use, you need to have some clear policies and procedures. And when I started looking for those solutions, it's like you get these crazy enterprise tools that don't even show you what they cost, or you get like Word docs and Google Docs, and it felt like there was nothing in between. And so that was the problem. It was pretty clear. And so I developed with some contract developers this prototype that I wanted to use with my customers. And I started giving it to them for free. And then I charged for a lifetime license, which was just a way to collect a little bit more money. And slowly over like 3 years, I started getting my own clients using it. And then even better, they were referring it to people I didn't know.
How awesome.
And it was, so after 3 years, this was a success by no means, but after 3 years, we had 27 companies on the thing. But it was covering my mortgage payment. And I thought, how cool is that? That there's like strangers around the world that put in a credit card and it's covering my mortgage payment. And that was when the aha happened, that it was like, instead of charging for the time to do operations consulting, why don't I flip that into marketing content? Let me just give away the advice and experience and share this and monetize it with a product that I know companies need. And so we polished it up, launched version 2 of Trainual, spun it into its own entity. All my employees from the consulting firm flipped over. We shut down the consulting. This was like a very quick decision, and we went all in. So it's been a fun ride. So now it's, like you said, it's a simple platform. There's templates. You can build your own. You can record your screen. You can embed videos from YouTube, audio files, slides, whatever you've got. But it's really just a place to put all the knowledge in the business.
And how are you finding that people are using it? Like, now that you've got more customers using it than you were working with directly, you've got people who you didn't know actually using it. What surprised you?
What surprised me? Well, there's a lot of interesting uses of it. Like, people have used it to train their customers or their clients. They've used it to even have applicants before they're hired go through some training and complete a quiz to make it to the next stage of the process. So there's cool ways people use it. What I expected and what is I think the quickest win is that if you're hiring people, you've got to give them some sort of orientation to your business. Now, the faster you can do that and say, here's what we do, here's our industry, here's our values, here's the other people you're going to work with, here's our process start to finish, it gets them comfortable and up to speed in their job. And that effort of writing that down, you get the most ROI out of, because every single person in the company has to go through that. Whereas the role-specific effort of, documenting a sales role, the scripts and objections and all this, that's great if you're hiring a sales force and you've got a lot of throughput in training that position. So you start with the base of, what does everyone need to know in the company? What do I want to track and hold people accountable for, that everyone signed off on this? Let's start there. And then let's build out the highest throughput roles, the ones that I'm going to get the most value out of what I put in here.
Very cool. We just hired a sales director on one of the projects that I'm working on, and he comes on board, and one of the first pieces of information he was shocked about is the lack of documentation. And immediately I was like, oh, what are you talking about? I've got whiteboard images that we've put in Slack that I can send you. So I literally went back and shared those. And as I'm doing it, I'm like, oh, this is a great opportunity for us to level up here. And one of the significant pieces of value this person is going to deliver to the organization is in the documentation. You get this balance of, hey, we're going to go move fast and we're going to learn things and we're going to break some stuff and we're going to figure it out as we go. But then we actually need to realize, hey, at some point we got to bring other people along, and how do we help accelerate their learning curve?
Yeah.
So Chris, what about those situations where someone goes in and they start trying the product, they start using the product through your trial, and it just isn't clicking. It just isn't the right fit for them at that point in time. What happens next?
Well, so earlier we talked about the do it, document it, delegate it. There's certain people that they're still in that do it phase. Like they're just not ready to document. And that's not a bad thing. It's not a strike against them. It's that they're innovating and they're testing things in the industry. And if you're not ready to delegate it, you don't have a reason to go through this effort, then it's premature. And, I wouldn't hesitate to tell someone if it was premature, because I don't want them to pay for something that's not producing value in the business. And so for me, any customer that signs up for a trial is kind of like they've raised their hands and said, I'm interested in this problem. I either have this problem or I anticipate that I'm going to have this problem. And so part of why we put so much energy and attention into the YouTube channel and the LinkedIn posts and all this content that we put out is because we want to educate people along that journey. Because when they're ready for the product in a year or 2 years, or when they bump into a friend that is ready for the product, we want them to be an advocate. So what's so cool is our number one cancellation reason when people cancel a trial or even a paid account is, I'll be back. With notes about how much they like the product. We've gotten testimonials from the little field in the cancellation reason, because it's not a problem with the software, it's a problem with the stage in their business. And so I think that's a important reason to do the content marketing, to focus on your brand. And it feels good,
And it's awesome to hear. And a lot of times what you see happen on the sales side is we get into this idea of kind of squinting and saying, well, yeah, we can do that. So then you get the scope creep of hey, I want the logo. I want to have this organization in here. And inevitably what ends up happening is someone leaves the relationship unsatisfied. We're either not hitting the marks, we're spending more time trying to support them. Things just aren't clicking. So, sales, as I think about it, is less about convincing people that we're the right partner for you or this is the right solution for this. It's more of how can we compel a person to take action based on an understanding of a problem that exists, that they have, and a solution that we have that fits with that. And it's important to have that fit. So it's really cool to hear you talk about it in that context and say, look, fit is really important, so much so that we're going to continue to give you information to help you on the documented side of things before they're ready to go to on the do it side of things before they're ready to really start documenting and getting to that point of delegation. Yeah, this is really cool. This is really cool, Chris. Thanks for the time. Where can people find out more about what you're doing and what's happening with Trainual?
So you can check out Trainual's website. It's just trainual.com, Trainual.com. Behind the scenes, all of my personal stuff that I'm working on and day-to-day agendas and personal and professional is on Instagram. So feel free to go there. And then LinkedIn and YouTube are where I'm posting most of the content. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and follow the channel, subscribe on YouTube.
Chris, thank you. Please check out the work that Chris and his team are working on at Trainual. I'll include all the links in the show notes. If you know of someone who would benefit from hearing this discussion, please share it with them and let us know via Twitter or LinkedIn. I'd like to hear how you're applying the lessons learned, concepts discussed in your role today. Sales is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about yours?